Good morning. It is time to add weekly feed to our Mittleider garden. I'm low on the weekly feed. I'm going to take this opportunity to show you how to mix the Mittleider weekly feed fertilizer and how to keep it dry. The instructions that come with a packet for mixing up your Mittleider weekly feed is pretty easy. Each package of the micro mix includes two 10-ounce packets of micronutrients. To mix up a single batch, you will mix a 10-ounce packet of micronutrients, 25 pounds of fertilizer, and 4 pounds of epsom salt. The problem starts with the weekly feed as soon as you add the epsom salt. When the epsom salt is added and mixed in with the other ingredients, it becomes hygroscopic and begins to absorb moisture out of the air. The weekly feed becomes damp, sticky, and the longer you store it will get a soupy consistency in the bottom of your container. Once it begins to clump, it becomes more difficult to apply it accurately in your garden to make sure that you're consistently providing the right amount of nutrients to your garden. We have started mixing our weekly feed a different way. That's what we're going to go over today. If you have already mixed up your weekly feed, you've got the Epsom salt in it. When I'm done with this, I'll go over some ideas for you to try to keep your moisture level from getting any higher. Let's get started. So the way that we mix our weekly feed to avoid it from getting wet and clumpy, making sure that our weekly feed stays dry, what we do is we mix the micronutrients with the fertilizer. We store that in a 5-gallon bucket, and each week when we need the weekly feed, we mix a small portion of that mixture, add the Epsom salt, mix everything up, and then go right to the garden. A 10-ounce packet of micronutrients, 25 pounds of fertilizer, mix it up real well to make sure that the micronutrients are distributed through the fertilizer, put it in a bucket, and you're done until you need to go to the garden. That mixture there, that is my micronutrients and fertilizer, that has been in that bucket for a year. It is still perfectly dry. It has not clumped in any way. So what we do when we need the weekly feed, I will take my mixture of the micronutrients and the fertilizer, and I'm going to weigh out a specific amount of that. To keep the proportions correct and make an approximate 7-pound batch of the weekly feed. Hold on, I'll kind of get into that just a little bit. I'm going to use 6.4 pounds of this mixture. When you convert that to ounces, which is a little easier to deal with here, we've got 102.5 ounces of this mixture is going to be combined with 16 ounces of the Epsom salt. When you have all of that mixed up, you have enough weekly feed for 7.9 30-foot soil beds or grow boxes in your Mittleider garden. Folks, I'm not a mathematician. I am not good with math. I'm calculating these numbers in a way that is easy for me with my skill level, and I make a little bit more than what I need, and I save the rest for the following week. If you are one of those brainy math whizzes and want to do the calculations for a specific number of beds, you leave a comment and add those calculations to your comment. I will make sure that I pin it to the top for everybody else to use. Otherwise, you can use these calculations that I have, get close to the number of beds that you need to fertilize, or the total number of feet if you're not running a standard 30-foot bed. Get close to what you need and you'll just have a little bit left over. If you mix 50 ounces of our micronutrients and fertilizer to 8 ounces of Epsom salt, you will have enough weekly feed for 3.86 soil beds. For those of you who are following our Grow Food Like Your Life Depends on It series, and you have 4 soil beds, if you mix 62 ounces of the micronutrient and fertilizer to 10 ounces of Epsom salt, you will have enough for 4.8 beds. It's a little bit extra. Another tip before I get into how to mitigate the moisture content in your already mixed weekly feed. When we mix this up, I do 50 pounds at a time. I use a full 50 pound of fertilizer and both 10-ounce packets of micronutrients. But I store them in 2, and here's why. If you look in that packet of micronutrients, there's some pretty small particles in there. When you initially mix your fertilizer and micronutrients, that stuff will be well distributed throughout the fertilizer. When you put it in your container, you carry it around a few times, you settle it, you set your container on the ground, those will settle to the bottom of your container. If you then scoop the mix out of the top to make your weekly feed to take to the garden, you're not going to get all the micronutrients that you need in your garden. If you mix a 50-pound batch, you can just get it, all of it, into a 5-gallon bucket. And before we make our weekly feed, just do one of those and redistribute all those micronutrients within your fertilizer. Pull out the amount that you need to make your weekly feed, and you're good to go. Your epsom salt, if the package is left open to the atmosphere, will draw in a little bit of moisture and your epsom salt will get clumpy. If you roll the bag up, roll out all the air, seal it tight, it's not as prone to clumping. A few tips for those of you that have already mixed your weekly feed and have noticed that it is getting tacky or wet. A 1/2 pound of perlite per batch mixed in with your weekly feed. That perlite will absorb some of the moisture that's in your mixture. A container that has a tight lid on it. These are Gamma Seal lids on our buckets. They are airtight when they're on proper. Will prevent any more moisture from coming in. You can mitigate the moisture level by not having a lot of extra air in your container. We have taken mixed weekly feed, put it in a Ziploc bag, rolled out all the air, sealed up the bag, and it's stored much better that way. We have also taken extra, put it in the Ziploc bag, put it in the freezer, and in the freezer it didn't absorb any more moisture. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them for you in the comment section or in the Mittleider gardening group on Facebook. I'll put a link to that group in the description for you. Thank you for watching, and happy gardening.